Inshallah.
Bismillah.
You are ready?
Yeah.
Brother Muzammil, can we record can we start recording? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsanin ila yawmiddin. Dear Professor Abul Fadl MOHSIN EBRAHIM, our guest of honor today in the Istac-World Professorial Lecture, all our professors, doctors, participants here in Malaysia and elsewhere in the world. I warmly welcome you to the 15th Istac-World Professorial Lecture to be delivered today by our beloved scholar, Emeritus Professor Abul Fadl MOHSIN EBRAHIM, who joined us from South Africa. Brothers and sisters, we are very thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we are continuing and sustaining our Istac-World Professorial Lecture. Today is the 15th lecture. We started a year ago, and alhamdulillah, already 14 great scholars, professors, leaders, ministers, and one prime minister have presented the Istac-World Professorial Lecture in many important topics and issues of merit and interest to all of us brothers and sisters. Today, alhamdulillah, we invited our great scholar, Professor Emeritus Abul Fadl, to deliver a lecture also in a very important topic of interest not only to the people who are in medical science, biomedical science, natural science, but in all types of science, as we are talking about a topic related to the core of Islamic jurisprudence and ethics and how we apply them in different fields. And for that matter, today we are talking about bioethics. In the beginning here, I would like to thank Professor Osman Bakar for inviting or helping us to invite our Professor Abdul Fadl to be with us here today. And it's an honor for me to introduce to you our scholar today. Emeritus Abul Fadl MOHSIN EBRAHIM from the School of Religion, Philosophy and Classics, Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, Howard College Campus, University of KwaZulu-Natal, Durban, South Africa. He is also a senior professor and researcher, Regent Business School, Durban, South Africa. He is also the academic director, the academic research director of the International Institute of Islamic Thought, Virginia, USA. Our professor today has accumulated a vast experience in his academic career as a professor, as a researcher, and also as a scholar. Our professor has obtained a Bachelor of Arts from Karachi University, Pakistan, in 1974. He has also Daraja al-Ijaza al-Alamiyya from the Alamiya Institute of Islamic Studies, Karachi, Pakistan. He has a Bachelor of Islamic Theology, Al-Azhar University, Cairo, Egypt, 1978. He has a Master of Arts in Religion, Temple University, Philadelphia, United States of America, in 1984. a Doctor of Philosophy, Temple University, Philadelphia, United States of America, 1986. The title of his doctoral dissertation was on Islamic ethics and the implications of modern biomedical technology, an analysis of some issues pertaining to reproductive control, biotechnical parenting, and abortion. Our professor today has published extensively and has presented many international papers in international conferences. To name few, among his books, a book on biomedical issues, Islamic perspective, Durban Islamic Medical Association of South Africa, abortion, birth control, and surrogate parenting, an Islamic perspective, biomedical issues, Islamic perspective, published in Kuala Lumpur here, Malaysia. Organ transplantation, contemporary Islamic ethical and legal perspectives. Organ transplantation, cloning, euthanasia, and animal experimentation, an Islamic view, Islamic foundation. Many other books, brothers and sisters, like an introduction to Islamic medical jurisprudence, reproductive health and Islamic values, ethical and legal insights, Muslims in Seychelles, a historical appraisal of their legacy. He has also published many articles, attended many conferences, just to name few, in the UK, International Federation of Obstetrics and Gynecology, biannual meeting, participation in ethics committee. He participated in the 21st Annual International Conference of the Egyptian Fertility and Sterility Society, and many others in more than 42 countries, brothers and sisters. Today we have our scholar with us to speak on a topic titled From Islamic Bioethics to Islamic Medical Jurisprudence, the New Discourse. It's really an honor to listen to our professor today, and the floor is yours, Professor. You have 45 to 1 hour to deliver your professorial lecture. You go ahead, Prof.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salamu ala Shafil Mursaleen Sayyidina wa Nabiyina Maulana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in wa ba'd. First of all, let me begin by thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for making it possible for me to actually speak on this topic. And I thank my very dear brother and colleague, Professor Dr. Osman Bakar, who invited me to deliver this lecture. And I thank Istac for accepting and actually accommodating me on your platform. Then anyway, this topic is very dear to me because I struggle as we go along. I struggle to, from the very beginning when I studied or when I wanted to study what is known as bioethics then. You know, in the 1960s, bioethics became a sort of a discipline, 1960s. But in the 80s, when I wrote in the field for my doctorate in the field of bioethics, then Islamic bioethics did not exist at all. There was no, the term did not exist. But as I kept on writing in the field from an Islamic perspective, and I found out that it was actually a problem for me, because I even spoke to my Ustaz, Professor Sayyid Hussain Nasser, and told him, you know, that what I'm doing is only looking at it from the juridical perspective, but I do not have any, you know, any examples, you know, given by the Muslim philosophers, like for example, Professor Usman Bakar, his specialty is in Islamic philosophy. So I was struggling with that, but he told me, no, just go on, carry on writing. And this is what I've been doing. And by heavily, I heavily relied on the juridical aspects and looking from bioethics from the juridical, Islamic medical or Islamic juridical aspects. Okay. So let me now go on to the introduction. The formulation of bioethics as a discipline originated only in the middle of the 20th century. In fact, medical ethics came about with the introduction of the Hippocratic Oath around 500 BCE. This oath is still revered by physicians, which amongst other concerns alludes to the treatment of the ill to the best of one's ability, preserve a patient's privacy, and to teach the secrets of medicine to the next generation. In essence, it laid down the foundation for what came to be known as medical ethics. As medical science evolved, issues such as reproductive decision-making, organ transplantation, just distribution of healthcare resources, access to healthcare, and with the appearance of COVID-19, global public health came to be included within the umbrella of medical ethics. Bioethics as an academic discipline falls within the parameters of philosophy and is a branch of ethics termed as applied ethics. Bioethics is nonetheless broader than medical ethics and incorporates medical ethics, animal ethics, and environmental ethics. And I want, when I'm trying to struggle with, trying to say that we must transform Islamic bioethics into the new discourse should be on Islamic medical jurisprudence, I want you to just concentrate on what I'm saying here. Just note what I'm saying here, is that bioethics is nonetheless broader than medical ethics and incorporates medical ethics, animal ethics, and environmental ethics. Now, as far as the theories in bioethics is concerned, bioethics is an important discipline in the field of applied ethics. The two main classical theories are deontology of Immanuel Kant, obligation not to lie, and utilitarian John Stuart Mill, the general good. All right, so now the greater good. So let me just stop here because we got students with us here. I'm sure most of you are students. So when you talk about this is again in philosophy now, it's the question of deontology. And we're talking about bioethics, the discipline of bioethics. All right. So now Immanuel Kant was the question of obligation, the right to do, the duty to do what is right. So now what is interesting is that if, in this deontology, you must always have the duty or your obligation must be to do what is right, all right? So you don't worry about the consequences of what happens after that. Your duty is you must uphold what is right. For example, thou shalt not lie, that you will not speak a lie. So now what happens is that, in the context of bioethics, or in the concept of the relationship between doctor and patient, then what happens is that at times, the doctors have to think, can I disclose to the patient what he's suffering from? Because it may have adverse effect, on him. It may psychologically have an adverse effect. But then from deontology perspective, is that the doctor is obliged, he cannot lie, he must tell the patient and don't worry what happens, the consequences of what happens. Now this is speaking about deontology. And as far as utilitarianism is concerned, the greater good. Now we've all been through, even in Malaysia, all over the world, all of us have been through the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. So now the very question that arose after they actually invented or they came up with a vaccine. You know, there were opposition all over the world. You know, when we got this problem today, or people against vaccines and so on. But then if you are actually, so utilitarianism would be that you must have the vaccine. The vaccination must be given. Irrespective of whatever harm they say, it will happen, because the greater good would be that you're going to save the population from that pandemic. You see, so this is just a very briefly, I wanted to tell my students or our students here about this perspective. Subsequently, new approaches of ethical reasoning and decision making were developed. Then we came, you know, to the great scholars, you know, which laid down the foundations for actually of bioethics, Beecham and Childress, the four principles: autonomy, and then you know, the autonomy, and then we have non-maleficence, beneficence, and justice. And again, just to briefly explain to you what it means. Now, autonomy would be in the context of bioethics. You see what happened? There was paternalism before. Paternalism means that the doctor knows everything and you are patient, you don't know anything. So we just do what we want. We actually devise for you the regime of treatment and you must just accept it. But this changed, it changed. And now they came up with autonomy. So now for you to have autonomy, the patient to have autonomy, the patient must be able to make an informed consent. So then you as the physician, when you describe to the patient the regime of treatment, then you must be able to make the patient understand, and then the patient will accept. And this is why we find that before you go to any hospital, then the patient has to sign the agreement, you know, an agreement that he wants for this procedure and that procedure. This is, but it should be through informed consent. And then the question of maleficence, there is no harm, that you must not do anything that will harm the patient. And then beneficence, again, is a question of, you know, you do something for the betterment of the patient. And then justice, fairness. Yeah, now here we may have a problem. Yeah, when we speak about fairness, and what I want to tell you is that there's a problem in the sense that if you have not enough kidney machines, all right, the kidney, what you call dialysis machines, and then you have a whole lot of patients waiting for it, and this is the fairness, this is a problem. What do you do? So now the thinking within the field of bioethics, you will find out the people who are younger must be given. So justice will be given to the younger patients because they have a longer life ahead of them. So the old patients would be, so when we do the justice, this is how we're going to do. So we prioritize the younger patient. But you know, you and I know as Muslims that ajal, you know, our life is known as ajal according to the Quran. It's all predetermined by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why, you know, this may be right, but then when we look from the Islamic perspective, we have a problem with that. And then we come to the question of feminist bioethics. You know, the females, they didn't want the men to do all the deliberations in the field of bioethics. They said that, no, we have a different way of looking at things. All right. So they expressed their gender concerns in bioethics, and they developed what is known as feminist bioethics. And then we have the other, this is again in the question of philosophy, casuistry and virtue ethics were rediscovered and redefined to examine complex bioethical issue. For example, casuistry, when we speak about that, then it's a question of lying. So if we can lie, it is not, now it will be opposed to deontology. So we can lie if it is for the good of the patient. So we don't tell the patient everything what he's suffering from. You know, we can do it, but we'll do everything, but please, we must tell the patient that not everything about his condition. All right. And then as far as the other one, virtue ethics is concerned, a member of staff breaking a hospital rule with the good intent so that it does not harm the patient. So if there's a rule in the hospital, for example, as Muslims, okay, as Muslims, let me just come, we are all Muslims, so I hope, inshallah, all that are listening to me are Muslims. You know, Muslims, unfortunately, when someone, because of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that we must visit the sick, all right, we must visit the sick. So we find when our Muslims are hospitalized and the news go around that a Muslim brother or sister is in the hospital, then every Muslim try to make an effort to visit that person. Why? Because of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. You know, he says that when you go there, you ask them to make dua for you, and the dua of the sick people will also benefit you, you know, because so all that. So that's why we find the incentive. So now imagine if you are a member of staff at the hospital and you know that the number of people that visitors must be 3 or 5, and then we find 10 people in there. So we say, okay, so come quickly, you know, visit the patient, and then you can go away, you know. So now this is, again, it will be virtue ethics. You're breaking a hospital rule, but with a good intention, not to harm, you know, we will harm the patient, okay? Then we have a new development as we went, that bioethics developed, you know, then bioethics and legal issues. When issues raised by experimentation and treatment could not be resolved by the patient, physician, family level, they were taken to courts. The first court cases involved tragic situations with dying patients. Families and hospital staff disagreed about whether to withdraw life-sustaining technologies, and courts were asked to make life and death decisions. You see, there was in America, I don't know whether you're aware of the fact that there was someone who was in the hospital and he was terminally ill. And there was a question that, you know, what happens in palliative care of the patient in terminal, when they are terminally ill? We give all the things that we try to do our best for the comfort of the patient, but then we do not deny the patient feeding the patient. So even if it's feeding through the tube and so on, we do that. All right. So we sustain the life of the patient. So now they took actually to court because it was argued that, you know, that men, we want to stop, he must die, like you starve the patient to death. So this decision had to be taken in the court. So they took that case, the family, I think the wife also took the case to the husband, I can't remember now, to the court, and the court decided in favor of that the patient should be starved to death. The disputes attracted the media, and people wanted to hear about the tragic case, which raised concerns and worries in every family. The combination of media attention and public interest made bioethics important to politicians who saw the need of creating statutes to actually the patient and family rights, to defend patient and family rights in healthcare settings. Now, even the question of, you know, then the politicians had to come in, then statutes they had to come up with the laws and so on. For example, there's a moratorium on cloning, a moratorium on human cloning. Okay, it was done. The animal, the Dolly the sheep, all of you are aware what happened to it. You know, eventually Dolly, the sheep who was cloned, had to be put to sleep because it developed arthritis and was a lot of pain. And they couldn't understand that why could this happen? Because he was young, you know, he was cloned, but then they couldn't understand. So now they made a moratorium on cloning, human cloning. But as far as cloning of organs is concerned, so in time to come, you know, we won't need to have to actually harvest human organs from human beings. We can actually create these organs in the laboratory. We can clone them, and we can have a human heart. So this is allowed. You know that they've passed laws like this is allowed. And as far as moratorium on human cloning itself, then that is, it stands until today. In Europe and America, the law adopted many of its positions on ethics. For centuries, Catholic moral theology held that patients have the right to refuse any treatment, even life-sustaining treatment, if it is a burden, risky, costly, or in the language of theological ethics, extraordinary. So now the courts, they say they made the decision following the Catholic moral theology in that respect. So you have the right to refuse treatment. All right. So now we know the cases of the Jehovah's Witness in America. They're not allowed to have blood transfusion. But then, strangely enough, although the courts normally tend to accept it, but then because the child is a minor, it happened in South Africa also. In South Africa, when a Jehovah's Witness father or parent, they refuse the doctors to actually have their son transfused because they are Jehovah's Witnesses. So what they took the doctor, the Muslim doctor actually, the Muslim doctor went to court and he took the parents to court and say that it is the court has to decide because the court has to decide because it is important for the life of the child to be sustained. And the child was a minor and he cannot make informed consent. So the court must take the decision. And actually the court overruled the parents' rights. And then they actually had the child transfused and the child's life was saved. Then we have the statutory law and court cases upheld this moral teaching. So this is just to tell you that bioethics then had legal implications, you know. So we don't only decide within the walls of the hospitals, but actually it went beyond the hospital into the courts. Now, setting the scene. Now, from Islamic bioethics to Islamic medical jurisprudence, the new discourse. Now, what I want to actually tell you is to set the scene is to just relate to you what happened to when I was studying, and I started by telling you that now, but then I will just again repeat that. When I submitted my doctoral thesis in 1986, there was no notion of Islamic bioethics, and as the title of my dissertation, as Professor Burgut pointed out, is Islamic ethics and implication of modern biomedical interventions, analysis of some issues pertaining to reproductive control, biotechnical parenting, and abortion. So this was what actually I was my topic of my thesis. But then how did I come to be attracted towards, let's call it bioethics, because at that time in the 1960s, there was no Islamic bioethics, but there was bioethics, all right? And it was a module, and the title of the module was Death and Dying. And I asked my professor, Rains, he passed away now, you know, I told him that I'm, you know, interested in that field. Then if you could assist me in getting a place, I mean, to secure a place, because it's very full. It's then for this module, it was always full of students. And I wondered, and I wanted to know why is it that the students are attracted to that module, Death and Dying. And interestingly, when I joined that I mean, I enrolled for that module, then I came to know that the young American students, you know, they had a problem with death and dying. Why? Because what happened after the World War, the patient was not brought, the bodies of the dead was not brought at home anymore, because then they came and they created funeral parlors, because now they had skyscrapers, if you want to call it, or flats or block of apartments, you know, 10, 11, 12, 13 stories. So they could not bring the dead home. So they created what is known as funeral parlors, and then they had the dead put there, and then everyone comes and view the dead. But what happens? You learned in that module that they actually they actually put they transfuse the they embalm. They do the embalmment of the dead. So when the dead, when you come and go around, in the funeral parlor, when you view the dead, then you'll see that they're very fresh. So it makes them, it makes the young people not to be scared of death, because they come up. But unlike us as Muslims, until today, the dead is brought home. So the young children, the grandchildren, even the small children, they are all there when the body comes at home. So we are every day of our lives, we face death at our home. So our young people are more able to cope with death rather than the Western people, as I explained. Okay. So now, so this is what happens is that when I wrote, it was has to do with Islamic ethics, but if you look throughout the thesis, it was more to do with actually what the Islamic legal analysis of the issues that I address as a reproductive control, biotechnical parenting, and abortion. It was not necessarily on the ethical side of it, and then perhaps you can engage me in that later on if you want to. So in some leading Western universities, what is termed as bioethics, what is termed as Islamic bioethics, is not taught as independent science, but within the discipline of bioethics. So we have certain universities, they will touch on it, but I may be wrong here, but I want to be corrected. In the Muslim world, for example, in Malaysia, so perhaps I'm not 100% sure, but this is what I read about it. And in Saudi Arabia, Islamic medical ethics rather than Islamic bioethics form part of the medical curriculum. So they do not speak about Islamic bioethics in the medical schools. All right, they speak about Islamic medical ethics. But then I know for sure, because I met a Saudi professor I met him in Oman, and he told me this is what they teach, Islamic medical ethics rather than Islamic bioethics in the medical curriculum in Saudi Arabia. So I strongly believe that Islamic bioethics is a misnomer. All right. And the argument for that, the first argument is ethics is a philosophical discipline pertaining to the notion of good and bad, right and wrong, or more life in community. Bioethics is the application of ethics to the field of medicine and healthcare. In other words, what is good and bad, right and wrong in the field of medicine and healthcare. But again, that has to, this has been broadened, as I explained. It had legal implications. It had to be taken to the courts and so on. So within the context of al-akhlaq al-Islami, Islamic ethics, what is good and bad, right and wrong, are not restricted to human actions in this mundane world, but have repercussions in the life hereafter. Now, this is important for us. That's why I have a problem when we speak about Islamic bioethics. When we talk about, when ethics is the question of right and wrong, is it right for me to donate my organs? All right, as a Muslim, we ask the question, is it right for me to donate my organs? Then the question that follows, can we donate, me as a Muslim, donate my organs to non-Muslims? Or should it be only to Muslims? So all this debate goes on. It's not a question of whether it's right or wrong, but it's a question of whether by doing that, we are going to have the wrath of Allah or the pleasure of Allah in life to come. You see? So it is more, a legal discourse rather than an ethical discourse. When we speak about, about this medical innovations in the let me use the word medical innovations, then it's actually a question of whether we are actually we actually restrict ourselves to ethics as a Muslim, or the ethical thinking, or rather with we actually go beyond that and actually analyze that in light of Islamic jurisprudence. And this is what we actually do. You know, although many scholars, you know, continue to write, you know, the papers and so on, and using the term bioethics or Islamic bioethics rather than Islamic medical jurisprudence. So then I continue with argument number 2. The discipline of bioethics has been broadened and includes medical ethics, animal ethics, and environmental ethics. So now you see what happened is that bioethics no more restrict itself to only the question what happens in you know, in terms of organ transplantation, cloning, milk banks, and so on. All these things that they deal with, it, artificial pacemakers, and so on. So it goes beyond that. They include what is known as animal ethics and then environmental ethics. But what has been still being addressed within the scope of Islamic bioethics is restricted to issues pertaining to medical intervention. So this is what worries me, is that why do Muslim scholars, you know, and I have been speaking to Professor Bergut before we started, that, you know, Muslim scholars, unfortunately, they are not proactive. You know, the Western philosophers and scholars, they deal with a hypothesis long before actually something happening. Long before an invention or intervention or medical intervention takes place, they already visualize it in their head. They have a hypothesis. This may happen. So what do we do? But we actually are reactive. So we react actually. When everything is done, now we say, oh, is it halal for us to do this, or is it haram for us to do this? But we are not thinking. We are not proactively thinking. This is the problem I have. So with although today, you know, if you look, and I will share with you, you know, some of the institutions that actually teaching Islamic bioethics, but none of them have actually expanded, you know, to include animal ethics and environmental ethics. And they still use, and it's all to do with medical interventions. All that they're doing is medical interventions, and they're giving us an Islamic perspective. Of course, it is from the Islamic juridical perspective, and not necessarily from the ethical perspective. Then argument 3, bioethics, as pointed out earlier, is a branch of applied philosophy. Deliberation of Muslim classical philosophers do not feature in any discourse on Islamic bioethics. So they did not feature. And then as I told you before, I struggled with it. I even asked my Ustaz, Dr. Sayyid Hussain Nasser, about it. And he was, you know, he told me that please do whatever you can in that field. You know, you do what you think is best. But I was struggling. I said, no, why? They have the question of deontology, the question of utilitarianism, speaking of that. But why don't we apply such thing from the Islamic philosophers, you know, and then to apply it in our field, you know, when you speak about these things, rather than only, you know, the legal perspective. Now we come to the institution. I'll just try 2 of these institutions, and they are online courses on Islamic bioethics. The syllabus, for example, the Hamad bin Khalifa University in Doha, Qatar. So look at all this that they have there. This is the syllabus, all right? The first module is classical Islamic bioethics. I don't know, they do not give you any indication of what it means by classical Islamic bioethics. You know, when you read it, even if you want to have a breakdown, no, you must enroll for it for you to know. But it's not given to you. You don't know what they're going to discuss there. What I want to point out to you is that, you know, in the fiqh books, you know, they already alluded to abortion in the books. Al-Ijhad. They have a chapter or sub-chapter called Al-Ijhad, Kitabul Ijhad. They already about abortion. You see, so they had this, whether this is what they mean here, I'm not sure. Whether they put that as classical, and then whatever they have to do with the question of the dead, the respect for the dead, and so on, which we do it in the fiqh, in the Kitab al-Janaiz, or Janaza, we have that, all these discuss, whether they're discussing that day as classical Islamic bioethics, I'm not sure. But then they come to contemporary Islamic bioethics, again, we don't know. But this one, we know what it means. The third one is the beginning of human life. So then again, from which perspective are you going to analyze the beginning of the human life? Is it from the philosophical perspective, from the ethical perspective, and then you call yourself Islamic bioethics? Or is it actually a legal perspective? It's actually the legal perspective. It's based on the Quran and based on the Hadith. That is what you are doing, the beginning and end of human life. It's not, there's nothing ethical in there. There's nothing ethical. That's why I struggle with this until today, and that's why the book that I wrote the last book that I wrote in the field of bioethics, if you want to call it, inverted commas, Islamic bioethics, and I call it an introduction to Islamic medical jurisprudence, because I think that this is what it should be. And okay, then we have beginning of human life, assisted reproductive technologies. So all that are dealt with, whether we can have artificial insemination, whether we can have sperm banks, whether we can have ova banks, and so on. Whether the main question is whether infertile couple can actually go for fertility treatment. All right. So this is all. There's no ethical, perspective on that. It will be purely from the legal, Islamic legal perspective, whether you're allowed or not. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you that some couple, Allah blessed some in the Quran, Allah blessed some with males, some with females, and with others, He gave them males and females. And then yet others, Allah left them infertile, all right, barren. So now the question is, as a Muslim, is it right for us as Muslims to be able to, and we are infertile? I mean, we have, they say they actually, from the medical point of view, if you are married, and then after 1 year of having married and living a husband and wife, then the wife doesn't fall pregnant, there is a cause for concern. It is a cause for concern. Then you must go, I mean, talking generally, and see a gynecologist. Both of you, both the husband and the wife must go to a gynecologist and then have themselves screened if there's anything preventing the wife from falling pregnant, So before, as Muslims, I may just stop here and tell you, as Muslims, we always blame the woman for not being able to bear children. We've been with a woman, then what we do? We say, no, then we must have a second wife. We must have a second wife because this one is barren. So we go on marrying the second wife, and the second wife also has a problem, doesn't fall pregnant. Then we have the third wife, the fourth wife, we have four, and this is what happens. And then we realize the problem is with us. Perhaps the sperm we are producing is very low in quantity, and so on. So this is cause a problem. Okay. Then we have dead end of life and concept of brain death. Again, when we came up with the concept of brain death, what is the question? It's all fiqh. It's all Islamic medical perspective. When does life come to an end? And then the question of organ donation, and then end of life care, life-sustaining treatments, the question of euthanasia, and then the ethics of pandemic of COVID-19. Now here, I may just stop here and then say, we call it the ethics of pandemics and COVID-19, but I don't know whether it's rightly said there. But anyway, I'm not, as I told you, we don't have a breakdown of the courses of this module, so I'm not in a sense to be able to share with you. But what I'm going to tell you is that we had a problem in Sri Lanka. I'm sure you read it when the pandemic issues, when the COVID pandemic started, then the question was that people were dying many people were dying. And then the Muslims, and then the law was passed there that you must be burned, that your bodies of the dead, even if they are Muslim, they ought to be burned. So you cannot bury them. You know, this was a big issue there in Sri Lanka. You know, so is that an ethical perspective, or is it an Islamic juridical perspective? Of course, this is an Islamic juridical perspective. Nothing to do with ethics. Nothing to do with ethics. Okay, now the second, this is the argument 4 here. The second, the fourth argument, and then we have the second institution that that is teaching. You know, it's called Al-Balag. That is in UK. Advanced Specialization Program in Contemporary Medical Fiqh and Bioethics. All right. So again, they call it specialization in fiqh of medicine. And this is the right, it should have been just Islamic jurisprudence, but they call it fiqh of medicine. You know, if it would have been easier if we just change it and said specialization in Islamic medical jurisprudence. It would have been very topical and fine. It's the first ever, and they're telling you, they're describing the course, it's the first ever international unique advanced specialist course that will train Sharia scholars to achieve an in-depth grasp and understanding of the dynamic nature of Islamic medical fiqh with its associated theology and usul al-fiqh, Islamic jurisprudence, in handling issues related to global bioethical issues. The course will have a Hanafi school focus, but will require scholars to be competent enough to be able to provide generic opinions from all Sunni perspective schools of Islamic law. This is an excellent opportunity for interested Muslims, scholars, and muftis to be important drivers, enablers in the synergy of Islamic jurisprudence and ethics within the practice of medicine at both the tertiary level, individual level, to social, societal, and global levels. Sharia scholars will have an excellent opportunity to gain significant advantage. So now in this, at least here, they are being frank. You know, they are being frank. They're telling us what is that actually what they're doing is specialization in Islamic medical jurisprudence, already not use the term. So this is the argument number 4, is that, but they still want to bring bioethics. But I think why they do that is because bioethics, in order to attract people, because they won't, if you restrict it to Islamic medical jurisprudence, they may not have students, you know, in the Western universities who are exposed to bioethics to come and do these courses. So that's why they include that, you know, they include medical fiqh and bioethics. And this is my last argument here, is the question of Islamic bioethics and misnomer. Argument 5, hence it is my opinion and firm conviction that what is termed as Islamic bioethics should rightfully be taught as Islamic medical jurisprudence, including the faculty of law in all universities. So now as I mentioned to you, we have these online courses in Islamic bioethics. But what I would like to see is that why don't, for example, in Malaysia, at the International Islamic Institute of International Islamic University, even at ISTAC, you know, why don't we actually start something in law? If we have a faculty, perhaps you don't have because you only postgraduate at ISTAC, but in the Islamic University, International Islamic University in Malaysia, then they have a faculty of law. So why didn't they introduce actually a program there called Islamic medical jurisprudence? So everywhere, even in South Africa, even in America, everywhere, all the Muslim countries where they have a faculty of law, then they must have, sub-discipline, and this is Islamic medical jurisprudence. And again, I want to point out to you that this is the argument 5, is that we spoke about the sources of bioethics, and we brought the philosophical sources, for example, deontology and utilitarianism. Just to briefly, I discussed that and pointed out, you know. But then But when we speak about the sources in Islamic medical jurisprudence, or even if I speak about, you want to call it Islamic bioethics, then the primary sources is the Quran and the Sunnah. So what is important for us to know as Muslims is that we cannot go and try to find solutions to the problems that are facing us in the contemporary world. We are not allowed as a Muslim to use our intellect first, all right? But first we have to look into the Quran first and the Hadith. So we look into the Quran and we get the broad teachings that are in the Quran. And then we try to apply that to the contemporary problems that we are facing. So this is what helps us Muslim to remain within the Islamic or within the Islamic worldview. All right, so we don't go out to find solutions first from other sources, but rather we look at it. For example, the question of let me go to the Sunnah, the question of organ transplantation. You see, very interestingly, and I found this very, very strange, you know, when the Muslim scholars were deliberating on whether it is allowed for us to have organ transplantation, what they did actually, they look into the Quran and Sunnah and so on, and then they speak the Quran, then they would say, whoever saves a life, it is as if it has saved the whole of humankind. So then they say, for example, if we have, you know, we have two kidneys, then, and we have a sibling or family member who have the same genotype, the same type, matching type, you know, it's not different. So then we can give one of our kidneys to that. So it will be like ahya, because the person doesn't have kidneys, you know, we are going to enhance. It's not, when we say ahya, it means here in the context of the Quran would be enhancing the quality of life of the patient. So that they came up with that it's allowed. And in the hadith, which I found very strange, is that they came up with it was one Sahabi radiallahu ta'ala anhu by the name of Ufraja. He actually, we are told in the hadith that he lost a nose in the battle, and then he had one fitted with silver, a silver nose. But now I'm thinking and struggling with the fact, how could a silver nose replace, you know, be created or be formulated in such a way that it would fit on the human body and be there. So then what it says again, when you read the hadith, we say that he gave off a bad smell. So he came to the Prophet ﷺ, because we are not allowed as men to use gold. Then he said whether we can have one made out of gold, and he gave the permission, and then the nose was made out of gold. But again, I struggle with that. But again, you see what they do? They try to find justification within the context. Whether it's broad, it might be, you know, something broad, but they try to bring it. And try to accept it and say, oh, there's a reason that we can have organ transplantation. Okay. Now the secondary sources. Now, what is interesting for us to know is that the question of ijtihad. Now, when we speak about the primary sources of Islamic law, then we have the four sources only as spoken about. We speak about the Quran, the Sunnah, Ijma, and Qiyas. All right, but nowhere do we touch on ijtihad. But actually, you cannot arrive at Ijma and Qiyas without indulging in ijtihad. So ijtihad is an important tool for us to arrive to Ijma and Qiyas. All right, and the question as students here, as my students who are listening, is why is it that Ijma comes first in the hierarchy of the sources of Islamic law, rather than Qiyas? Because you cannot have an Ijma, a consensus, unless and until you have actually had analogical deduction. And then you come to the ijma and say, okay, no, now it's fine. It is, we accept it. So we have an ijma that's accepted. But you see, first you have to do the qiyas. You have to apply what you call the illa to the old case to the new case and so on. And then you come to an ijma. In the scholars meet and they say, okay, now we've deliberated on it. We performed the ijtihad, the qiyas and so on. So now we come to the question of ijma. Just briefly to speak about the problem that we face all over the world. I'm sure in Malaysia, you face the same problem. In the Muslim community in South Africa, it's a big problem. It's a big problem of drugs. We have a big problem of drugs. And, they have all types of drugs being invented and on the streets, and Muslims are actually in the forefront for that. Unfortunately, in the forefront. So then we came up with all these new things, whether you call it marijuana or you call it cocaine and so on, whether it's allowed or not allowed. So then again, they make the qiyas just for the students, just to refreshen their memory about that. So then we find that the illa causes befogging of the mind. So there is hashish or marijuana or cocaine and so on will cause the problem with your brain. So it will be haram. It will be haram. So that's why it comes. So we come to then we come to ijma. And then we say, okay, now the consensus is that. But now the question that I pose is, why does ijma come in the hierarchy? It comes before qiyas. Why? Because of the ijma of the Sahaba. The ijma of the Sahaba. So we uphold, we cannot reverse the ijma of the Sahaba. That is why it precedes it. All right. And just to give an example, which is not here, which is not part of our discussion, but just to make you understand, it is the question of the Tarawih Salah. All right, the Tarawih Salah in Ramadan. So it was the ijma, of the Sahaba. Of course, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who actually say that how nice would it be? We see little pockets of people praying, around in the masjid, different corners, little pockets of people. He said, why don't we all join together and we make the Salatul Tarawih? So then this is how the ijma. So we have the ijma of to perform the Tarawih Salah in congregation in the month of Ramadan. Then we come to the tertiary sources. We have Islamic legal maxims. All right. For example, that akhafud dararain. Akhafud dararain means the lesser of the two evils. For example, now we have an example of. Let me give you an example. We say that the human body is sacred, so we cannot cut the human body when the dead is. That's why we have a problem. When the post-mortem is concerned, we have a problem. Is it allowed for Muslims to have post-mortem? Even here in South Africa, we have a problem. We try to get the doctor and say, why don't you make it easy? But then when it is a case which involves the law, for example, murder, there's no way Muslims will be able to have their dead, bring it home without having a post-mortem. It is necessary because now we have to convict the murderer, and this is important to have that. So, okay. So now, but when we go and say, for example, if there's a woman who is pregnant, dies, all right, when she dies, then we have, and then we see that she's pregnant, but we see movement, movement in the belly, So what do we do? Do we bury the two together, or we slit it open and remove if it's over 6 months, over 6 months old, then we do a cesarean section and remove the baby. So a kafud dararain, we miss to lose 2 lives. Why should we lose 2 lives and we can save 1? So we can and desecrate the mother, desecrate the sanctity of the mother's body. We can desecrate it to save the life of the unborn. You see, this is how we reason in that. And then Maqasidu Sharia, high objectives of Islamic law. And now this has been recently added as a tertiary sources, recently added. For example, Al-Ghazali when he speaks about Imam al-Ghazali, the objectives of Islamic law, you know, which are the 5 objectives of Islamic law. And we try to reason all the things, you know, in light of that. Okay. For example, one of the, I'll give you an example here. An example of that is the question of Hifzul Mal. You know, it's preservation of wealth. Preservation of wealth. Now, a problem may happen. A problem may happen when you are faced with a problem of, you know, of course, if we stay in a sophisticated world where we have access to all sorts of medical interventions, all right? So when you have access to that, for example, we have access to ICU, but in intensive care unit, but it is very expensive to put patients in ICU. So now the question is, do we jeopardize the financial strength of the family members, put everything at stake for the sake of one person to be put in the ICU? You see, that is the thing. So Hifzul Mal, whether now the thinking, so the deliberation is going, does it justify us to put so many people in jeopardy, their lives, their livelihood, their wealth, and so on, and now just to care for, give medical care for one patient? So I won't say anything, but I'm just trying to raise question for you to think. And then the last one is fatwa. But what you find today is, unfortunately, the Muslims, you know, they depend a lot on fatwa. And the problem with the Muslims, they go around what is called, even in South Africa, we call that fatwa shopping. Fatwa shopping. So if you are not happy with a fatwa given by one alim or one mufti, then we go to another mufti, and then we say, you know, we have another opinion, and then this one is better, so we'll adopt that. You see, so we haven't. The problem is that fatwa, we fail to understand that fatwa is actually the deliberation of one individual. So that's why I am in favor, besides fatwa, what is being done. I'm sure in Malaysia also you have, in Singapore I think they have, and in the Arab world they have it, in Pakistan, in India, where they have this Al-Majma' al-Fiqh al-Islami, the Islamic jurisprudential bodies, and then they deliberate on these issues, and they come up with not fatwa, but they come up with qararat, which means resolutions. You know, they come up with qararat, which means resolution, and that is more powerful than a fatwa, because this is it's almost like a consensus, and this is the way forward, actually, you know, to have this qararat. So I think that time must be going or something. Just to let you know, the scope of Islamic medical jurisprudence is very vast. You know, termination of life, abortion, euthanasia, prolongation of life, organ and transplantation, artificial organs, respirators, cardiac pacemakers, tampering with nature, sex preselection, sex change operation, improving the quality of life, genetic screening, genetic engineering, and then resolving fertility problems, assisted reproductive technologies, and then experiments involving humans. Now, when we said experiments involving humans, you know, at my university, just to share with you, at my university, because we have AIDS in South Africa, you know, there's a big problem. So they have created a gel which would be used by the woman, all right? And then they would have people volunteering themselves. So experiments involving humans. So males and females not married to each other, then they would have intimate relations to see whether, so they have someone who's got HIV positive. Now the woman will not be HIV positive, but will use that gel, and then have that, you know, the sexual act be performed, and see whether she's safeguarded from contracting HIV. So you see, so that's what they do. But as Muslims, again, Is it an ethical issue, or is it a legal issue? It is a legal issue because we cannot volunteer for such experiments, involving human beings, because we cannot do that, because we cannot have sexual relations until and unless we are married to that person. So again, you see that is something for us to think about. Okay.
Yes.
The opportunities, as I mentioned, if we create that Islamic medical jurisprudence in the law faculty in all universities all over the world, in Muslim universities, in non-Muslim universities, then it will attract people. The wide array of issues covered in Islamic will attract Muslim medical scientists, Muslims and non-Muslim healthcare personnel, bioethicists, Muslims in general, and broaden the outlook of the ulama to go beyond what is known as fatwa. And the conclusion, or the challenges, again, the challenges is that in 2021, when I produced a chapter, it's called the Islamic Juridical Principle of Dire Necessity, Darura, and its application in the field of biomedical intervention. But it appears in a book by Padela. Asim is doing good work in Chicago. I don't know whether he's moved to another university now, but he's doing good work, and then it was published under the title of Medicine and Sharia, bioethical medicine and Sharia, a dialogue in Islamic bioethics, Indiana, Notre Dame University. So they keep on publishing under the title, these books of Islamic bioethics. And the conclusion, to this day, Islamic medical jurisprudence is not being taught as an independent science in any global academic institution. It will alert Muslim scientists that they are accountable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Every soul, Allah says, will be held in pledge for its deeds. So the Muslim scientists, like I told you, the intervention of how do we, the question of HIV AIDS, whether this would be allowed. So Muslim would say, we cannot actually go for that type of, human experimentation because it's against the Sharia. Medical research should therefore not entail transgressing the limits set by Allah, so that compounding genealogy or tampering with the essence of human personality is freedom and ability to bear responsibility. Muslims address bioethical dilemmas differently, not whether they are good or bad, right or wrong, but whether they are in trying to, when we try to resolve that, whether it has a bearing in the life to come, whether we will be punished for that or not, or we are rewarded for that. So that's what we actually do. Hence the relevance of Islamic medical jurisprudence rather than Islamic bioethics as independent discipline. And I say this, shukran, aqulu qawli hadha wa astaghfirullah wa shukran wa assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Yeah, mashallah. Thank you, Prof. Abu Fadl, Mohsin Ibrahim, for this very informative, enlightening, and very simple yet powerful lecture, which raises a lot of important issues and questions for those who specialize in these areas, and for us all, especially in the disciplines of Islamic studies. This is really a wonderful lecture, Prof. Thank you very much indeed. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you for all this deep knowledge and great articulation of this very, I think I can say, complex and important area. In fact, for the sake of time, we will open for questions and answers. Those who wanted to ask directly, we will allow for that. I hope people can direct the questions directly and make it short so that we can take more people. And we have also our questions from the Zoom and the YouTube, and we will try to mention them, inshallah. So let me start. I think Professor Usman Baka would like to say something. Prof. Usman, please go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Bargood. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First of all, I just would like to take this opportunity, First, of course, I thank Allah for this opportunity for me to see you again after have lost the contact for quite a long time, and now you. So I joined Professor Abdul Aziz very good in thanking you for accepting our invitation. Now, for the sake of the information to the others who are present here, well, I would like to tell that now Professor MOHSIN's presentation reminds me of those days when we were at Temple University, and I remember very well Professor MOHSIN. I call him Professor MOHSIN. Professor MOHSIN, he was in a hurry to finish his PhD on topics of Islam and bioethics. Basically, it is a response from the perspective of jurisprudence, really, and the perspective of a jurist. So while he was doing that, and I envy he finished earlier than me. He was working very hard. I was still struggling with my thesis. I mean, he was already presented his thesis. What I was doing at the same time, because we had a lot of conversations actually in Temple on subject which he correctly said was new. There was the term Islamic bioethics was not there, but we are Muslims. We were Muslims. We were interested in the bioethical issues of the time. He was writing from that perspective, from the perspective of Islamic law, from the perspective of the Sharia, basically. I was also interested from another perspective, that is perspective of classification of knowledge. I was interested to situate this discipline dealing with the discipline of bioethics. Where should it be? Should be located. Yeah, and it's interesting. At the same year he presented his PhD thesis, I presented a long paper, Islam and Bioethics. Islam and Bioethics in 1986 at a conference organized by the Greek Orthodox Church. It was published in the Greek Orthodox Review and it's published in my book Tawhid and Science. Not changed. Now there I did mention the word. I postulated, or I make this strong case that in the past there was the discipline of biomedical jurisprudence. Now, let me say now, because I agree, the title that was given to that was presented by Professor MOHSIN, and used the word medical jurisprudence, from Islamic bioethics to medical jurisprudence. I use biomedical. But the correct one is medical jurisprudence from the viewpoint of epistemology, is medical jurisprudence, and also from the view of history of Islamic thought. Let's say take Ibn Sina. He was a medical scientist. He was also regarded as a philosopher. And certainly Ibn Sina dealt with issues which are now considered as bioethics as well as this biomedical ethics. That's correct. Yeah. So what I presented was that actually what happened in the Islamic world in the past. Yeah, you have some of the juries dealing with the subject of bioethics, what we call today bioethics. Some of the issues, question of contraception, the question of abortion, the question of the meaning of life and death, that was discussed in jurisprudence by the jurists. But the same issues were discussed by the philosophers because Ibn Sina treated medicine as a branch of philosophy. So he was a medical doctor. He treated medicine as a branch of philosophy, but and also biology. Biology. It is today in the modern world, in the modern university, that you have faculty of medicine. You have faculty of science dealing with biology, but biology is also there in the faculty of medicine. So, because at that time I was looking at the literature, I thought what terms should I use? I said, yes, medical jurisprudence. But the point is, regularly, the law of evidence, then in Islamic civilization, the discipline of medical jurisprudence was going on, was going on. But the important thing was the interaction between medical scientists, such as Ibn Sina, and say on the medical jurisprudence, let's say, for example, as we have in the case of Ibn Nafis. Ibn Nafis, the discoverer of the minor circulation of the blood. He was the first in the West. So at that time, that was in 1986, and then I didn't in contact with Professor MOHSIN. He went his own way, crossing a lot of things, many things. But I go a different way in the philosophy one. Then I can clearly see in my another paper which I published also in Tawhid and Science, the philosophy of Islamic medicine. There is quite clearly a lot of ethical issues in medicine. For example, Ibn Sina's one of the branches of medicine treated by Ibn Sina was animal ilaj, means therapeutics. So therapeutics includes surgery, includes basically the ethics of medicine, in the sense that where you have this based on the prophetic hadith that the Prophet ﷺ discouraged over prescription, giving too much medicine, for example. And this medical advice from the Prophet ﷺ. So that's stated under the branch of knowledge called Ilmul Ilaj by Ibn Sina, which today comes under bioethics. So, and I want to stop there. Just not. I thought. Thank you, Professor, because I don't think the issues have been resolved. But I welcome your re-asserting the discipline called biomedical, medical jurisprudence, because that existed before. So we are now renewing that tradition of Islamic, the tradition of the medical jurisprudence in Islam, Islamic civilization, but with new issues and many new issues. And it seems like that the issues created by Western science and American science are going faster than what we Muslims can respond in terms from them. This is our problem. The progress of medicine is faster than what we can do in terms of what should be the Islamic answers. Now, of course, you have this discipline of neuroscience, which is also raising a lot of medical issues, neuroscience. The question of now trying to turn the human body into biomachine and so on. All are these ethical issues that we Muslims have to address. So I would like our younger generation to, and of course, this is a very good thing. So thank you, Professor MOHSIN.
Shukran.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Maybe this is another reason to invite you to give the second professorial lecture on this, inshallah. Prof. MOHSIN, you want to comment, or I read for you some of the important questions which we received?
Yeah, you is it on? Is it here?
Yeah, we have any comment about
no,
what Prof.
Osman
mentioned?
Is it in the chat?
Yeah, we have in the chat here. We have the question of our young scholar. Our sister Mariette Kosi is from actually Peru, and she says Elon Musk is testing by placing computer chip in the brain of pigs and using computer game controller to move the pig. Assuming Musk's research can shed light on computer intelligence, what reasons would you give for this practice being unethical?
Very difficult question. Yeah, yeah. It's so what is it? Is it written? Is it on the chat there?
Yeah, it is on the chat there.
On the chat
Question, and also another related question. Yeah, you go down there. It is a question from Marriott Kossi. You managed to find it, that?
No, I would like to read it nicely to understand and digest it before I speak. The pig one, I can't see.
Let's.
I can't see the pig one here.
Yeah,
you mentioned. There are other people there.
Maybe the fourth one before last. You go up there.
Is it from the beginning? Then we have.
From the beginning, you can go down to the fifth question. Marriott Kossi there. Elon Musk is testing by placing computer chip.
Wait.
Maybe, Prof. There are actually a few questions which are interrelated. The other question, if you can listen to it, in Japan, there is booming business in using robotics to make replacement.
I got that one here. This one that you mentioned first.
Read it.
Elon Musk is testing by placing computer chip in the brain of pigs and using computer game controller to move the pig. Assuming to Musk research can shed light on computer intelligence, what reasons would you give for this practice being unethical? All right. Let me think, okay?
Yes. Yeah, I think, Prof, you can come back to it. Just.
All right. Okay, we come back to it. So can you give me the other one?
Okay, the other one. Also here in Japan, there is booming business in using robotics to make replacement limbs, such as artificial arms and legs. Given the rise of technology and an aging population, do you think artificial limbs will be the next big bioethical area?
Yeah, now so far as this is concerned, it's very easy. All right. So now the principle that we hold, okay, the principle is that we must try and do our best to enhance the quality of life. All right. So now if you use all these artificial limbs and so on, there's nothing absolutely wrong with that, because we are going to make the person become mobile, not dependent on people. You know how difficult it is today, you know, especially if you don't have anyone to help you and so on. It's very difficult for you to be a paraplegic. But if you have the help that you, for example, lost a limb and then you have an artificial limb, and then there's nothing unethical about that, nothing un-Islamic about that, nothing from the fiqh point of view that would say that it is not right for you to do that. Okay, so it is actually replacing that. And then when the question that you may ask after that, what happens when the person dies? Then it's not part of the human body. So you take it out. Before janaza, you take it out and then you bury the person without it. Okay.
Yes.
Any other question?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we have another question from Karima Usama. Dear Prof, what is your opinion if a Muslim wants to make a bequest that upon his death, instead of burying his body, it should be handed over to a medical university to use it for teaching students?
All right. Now, a very good question. All right. Now, this question that you pose is not a new question. It happened even in the time of, you know, Ibn Sina and so on, you know, and Al-Razi. And they already gave the permission at that time, you know, they said it's allowed for you to do that, you know, but then, so we will delay the janazah and then we have the students benefit from it. But today, in today's context, I don't think we need that anymore, because we got these computers where they can actually go online. They can have all this, exactly what happens in the human body, exactly how each organ functions. All this can be done. So why should we donate our, our bodies for this up to date? Because today we have enhanced that. We have enhanced knowledge through computerization and so on. So we don't actually need, when there's a need for it. There was a need in the time, of our classical medical doctors. Then there was a need for it. But I don't think there's a need for that anymore, because knowledge has expanded beyond the boundaries today. We can access anything online. We can even do that. As I mentioned, the whole human body, everything, how they function, each one of them, we can study. The student can study in groups or even in the university lecture. So we don't need to do that now. But there would be nothing wrong if it were done. It would be nothing wrong if it were done. But of course, let me just mention to you, in South Africa, they don't do it anymore. But when they had a body brought in for the students to dissect and so on, you know what they did? Every one of them stood and 1 minute in silence, because they were Muslim students, non-Muslim students, and then they take a silent thing that they are not to desecrate the body. Whatever they're doing now is for them to advance the knowledge. All right, this is what they did. So it's a respect of the dead when they're doing that. But as I mentioned to you, I don't think what you brought up would stand as a valid reason for us to donate our bodies today for that. Okay, because of the advancement in knowledge. Shukran.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. I think that's really enlightening. Is there any question from the Zoom directly to Professor? We are having more questions are coming in the chat here. Is there any scholar or researcher or participant would like to ask the professor a direct question?
All right, there's a question here. Is it permissible for someone to make a bequest to donate his 2 eyes upon his death or prior to death? Now, we cannot give our vital organs before death. We cannot give it, or prior to death. So we cannot sacrifice our sight for the sake of someone else, because it was given to us by Allah. And sight is something that we give thanks to Allah for that. So we cannot say, oh, my sister needs the sight more than me, so I can give it to my sister. No, you can't do that. This is an organ, you can't do it. But then we cannot actually donate the eyes after death. We cannot do that, because it would, once death takes place, whatever is functions for us to see with the eye. So the eye you cannot give, but you can donate before the janazah salah. If you write, you give, actually you say that I would like to give my cornea as a donation after my death. That would be perfect. Do you know there are thousands and perhaps millions of people in the world who have corneal blindness? But unfortunately, we find that Muslims today, they do not, as I say, they are not proactive. They do not think of so many people. Why let that cornea be rot in the grave? Why don't they all they sign up as organ donation, but even if only for corneal transplant. So many people will be able to have sight, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that is the way to go the way forward to go. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. I think that's great. We have a question from Dr. Kelam Wong. He asks, can we use data or experience from investigations using pigs to be applied to Muslims? For example, liver and heart transplantation using pigs as the source organ and learning the techniques.
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I don't know. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade us from eating pork. Okay, it's made haram for us. But interestingly, when you look at the pig heart, it is identical, almost identical to the human heart. And they have done that. They have transplanted the pig's heart into human heart, and it's been fine. There was nothing wrong. So the scholars have come around that, they say, okay, then it is the flesh of swine that is not allowed to be consumed by the mouth and be part of that. But as far as the heart is concerned, if there's no other way, but only to have that, there's plenty of problems. There's a whole list of people on the waiting list for heart, for heart and so on. So now, if we have the organs of the heart organ, the heart of a pig, just to improve the quality of life. Again, I say the quality of life because Allah knows when the ajal will come. All right. So we say the quality of life, then there's nothing wrong with that. So the scholars have already given fatwa about it. The Kuwaiti scholars, the Saudi scholars, the people in Jordan. So there's nothing wrong to use the human pig heart, the pig heart, to be able to transplant it. Again, if there is no other organs available, this is the question mark. If there is no other human organs available, a human heart available, then it would be okay to do that, to donate it. But if there is, then you cannot have that. Okay. All right.
Thank you, Prof. A very great answer. Now we have one question, which is, okay, we have one brother participant. Adamo, you want to ask a direct question?
Yes,
Right.
yes, sir, yes, sir.
You
Thank
go
you very
ahead.
much, Prof, for the opportunity. My question has to do with post-mortem.
Right.
I don't know whether they are laid down ethical guidelines for conducting post-mortem, because in some cases patient relatives will refuse vehemently, will go against it, and I don't know if they are laid down ethical procedures to enlighten people regarding what does it say. Prof, thank you very much.
Yes.
So
Go ahead, Prof.
your question is about post-mortem. All right.
Yes.
Just for me to understand your question, can I repeat it? Okay, the question is about post-mortem.
Ethical.
Sorry?
Ethical guidelines. Yes.
Medical guidelines for post-mortem.
Network is.
What is it?
Network is a little bit bad.
Brother Adamu, I can't.
Network is so bad.
Yeah, I think he has some network, but
yes,
he was talking about the post-mortem. What is the Islamic ethical view of that one?
Yeah. So the question of post-mortem, as I mentioned to you, so not every case, not every person who dies would the wife be the body be subjected to post-mortem. And I'm sure you know that. It's not everyone.
Yes, I know that.
Only if it is a problem. All right. The patient died in the hospital. All right. And they want to know the cause of death. All right. And if there's murder cases, then they want to know the cause of death. Then they would have the post-mortem done. And as Muslims, and when you study the fiqh, we cannot, the law of the land must be observed by Muslims. We cannot say that Muslims, we are not allowed to have our bodies desecrated. But they have to actually bring justice or bring an end to how the person died, or the reason they did it, is the Lord of the land that is asking for it. So we go ahead with it. But for normal person died, we don't, and everyone agrees that we won't have a post-mortem done. Okay?
Yeah, thank you, Prof. I think that's a very clear answer. Prof, as you mentioned in in your lecture something on the epistemological perspective and philosophical perspective of bioethics. Our sister Bibi Isharat is asking a question: is there any mutual interplay or an engagement taking place between the field of religiously neutral bioethics and the Islamic paradigm?
The question is whether internationally, the question is whether internationally there's a dialogue taking place between
yes,
religious,
the Islamic paradigm and the neurobioethics, how religion actually can be related to this area of bioethics.
Yeah. Now you see that all the religions, all of them, they have the input in bioethics. All right, we have all the religions input in bioethics. As I mentioned to you, for example, the Jehovah's Witnesses, then they will say that, you know, it's not allowed for us to have the question of blood transfusion and so on. So they have and the Catholics also, the question of that they have the right to refuse treatment. So they're doing it in such a way. But as far as where across the board, when they come, and then we have an international gathering where the Muslims actually question about it, you know, this I haven't come across that at all. In the conferences that we have, that I've been to, you know, normally we stand up and say, this is the Islamic perspective and so on, you know, so we come up, but they haven't engaged us as such to come on a universal platform and then to share our view of it. And I think it's important. If we can do that, it will be very good, because they will come to know, you know, the vast, the vast interpretations that we can give on many of the bioethical issues that we are confronted with. Shukran.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Yeah, I think consenting what you have just said, Dr. Ki Lam Wong, he was saying at least a one-day workshop on medical jurisprudence. So
yeah,
I
there's
think
a brother
you have raised
hand there. Muhammad Nizar raise his hand. Muhammad Nizar.
Okay, Muhammad Nizam, please go ahead. If you have any direct question to Prof, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Abdul Fadl Mohsin and Professor Berkut. I am coming from medical field. I am pathologist, and I am the former rector of Aleppo University in Syria, now living in Turkey. My questions concerning the present and the future of stem cells transplantation. You know, you have mentioned about transplant of organs from pigs to human, as heart pigs to humans. Okay. Nowadays, stem cells, they can come from different issues, from females to males, from males to male, from Muslim to non-Muslims, and from non-Muslim to Muslims, and maybe from, in the future, I don't know, from animals to humans. So this is applied from ethical points, from Muslim ethical points. This is applied also to stem cells as organ transplants. I mean, there is general agreement about the useful and application of stem cells in our body if we need, of course.
Yeah, but is your question on stem cells, or is it on organ transplantation? Or organ transplantation across Muslim, non-Muslim? Is the question?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, so now the question about stem cells, they are still researching on it. But what the Muslim scholars say, there's nothing wrong for us to carry researching on stem cells. Okay, there's no, because many diseases that cannot be cured today, because the use of stem cells, it will be able to be cured. All right, and then especially when it's taken from the umbilical cord, you know, and because they preserve that, and in time to come, if you fall, you become a victim of one, not a victim. You become you come to suffer from a type of disease. Then they can use the stem cells by that time, you know, to be able to repair the disease that you have. Okay. Now, as far as, but again, you must see the stem cell will be your own stem cells. Okay, it won't be across because of the different genotype that we are in. So the base will be the stem cell that are harvested from your body, from the umbilical cord or something like that. Okay. Now, as far as the organ donation or transplantation from Muslim to non-Muslims are concerned, okay. Now, this has been a debate. All right. Where I come from here in South Africa, it was a big problem. A big problem in the sense that there's a hospital in Cape Town called Groote Hospital. So Muslims have been received donations from non-Muslims, you know, for hearts, for lungs and everything, okay, liver and so on. But then when it came for them to give, then they say, no, my religion doesn't allow me to give to. You're not allowed. So I thought, I say how hypocritical they are, how hypocritical Muslims are. You can receive the organs from non-Muslim, but then you can't give your organs. Yeah, you can't give your organs to non-Muslim. You are a hypocrite. So what the university did, the hospital did, they put a moratorium on Muslims receiving organs from that hospital because they refuse to give organs. All right. So that's the question. Then the question that came to what you rightly asked, you know, is the question: is the organ from a non-Muslim impure? Impure. For example, you would come and tell me, you know, that person drinks alcohol, so his heart, you know, all that, it has been, you know, polluted by alcohol and so on. This thing. So how can I have this heart, you know, transplanted into me and so on? So the scholars deliberated on all that, and they say that the najas, what they say, that the non-Muslim are najis, the body is najis only because of the iman. Only because of the iman. All right. So not because of their body. I mean, the sanctity. You remember the Prophet ﷺ one day was standing outside with the Sahaba Ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'in, and then a janaza passed by. He stood up. So then he told him that this janaza is for a Yahudi. He said, but doesn't he have a soul? So he respected that. So, all right. So in the same way, so they came up and they say that we can have the organ. It's only the question of iman that they are not just, not their body itself. Okay. I hope that answers you.
Thank you, Prof. I think that's great. In fact, we have another 2 or 3 questions here. We can read them together. Dear Prof, this is an important lecture in this new area. Do you think we can have a comprehensive Islamic jurisprudence on bioethics, or just some ethics and values and Islamic practices put together?
No, of course.
Means, I mean, is it like a comprehensive jurisprudence which has its foundation, and or just you know, reacting, as you said, to some practical things?
Yeah. You see that this is my problem. My problem is that Muslims are not proactive. They are not proactive. So we have to look in the future. For example, now they are talking about transplanting the brain from one person to another. So my question, you know, so we have to deliberate on that, whether it's allowed or not allowed, because now on Yom Al-Qiyamah, that person who got the brain of someone else, he say, oh Allah, you know, I was a good Muslim, but they transplanted the brain and overseed me, and now I became a sinner. You know, so all these things, these are all hypothetical things which we can. So I mean, I would go ahead with what you are saying, that we should have a comprehensive, where scholars come together, whether they want to call themselves Islamic bioethics, whether they want to call them Islamic philosophers or whatever, all come together and let us actually come with proactive hypotheses and then see how we can deliberate upon that. This is how knowledge is actually furthered. We've had further knowledge through that. We cannot further knowledge by being reactive and thinking after something happened, oh, what do we do as Muslims? Okay.
Alhamdulillah, I think that's great, Prof. This is very, very great discussion, and I I hope you enjoyed the questions of our people here. And because of maybe the sake of time, otherwise there are few questions. And also the first question of Sister Marriott regarding the Elon Musk and testing by placing computer chips and all this. I think in general we understood how we really assess things based on Islamic perspective, where we look at the maqasid sharia and also we look at the desirable good life which Islam wants us to build. So when we look from the bigger picture, we can put these piecemeal things together, then we can really understand what does mean a comprehensive Islamic bioethics jurisprudence. I think this is very wonderful. I'm not sure all our audience in the Zoom and the YouTube are following very attentively your lecture, Prof. If there is no any last question from the Zoom here, direct question, we can maybe come to the last part of closing our professorial lecture today, inshallah. Let's see if there is any last question from our audience here. Okay, Prof, you want to say any last word before I close the professorial lecture today?
Yeah, but I spoke to you before we started, and I told you, normally I've attended many of these online discourses I've given, but people don't ask questions, but I really enjoyed my time with all of you. I'm really, really, happy that I've been able, and you raised questions and made me think. And then, and I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, bless over you, whatever, all of you, whatever studies you are carrying on, then remember always that we are Muslims first, and that is important. We are Muslims first, and we may be a Malaysian, we may be South African or other, but we are Muslims first. So whatever we do, in whatever discipline we are engaged in, remember that we must expose and expose our Islamicity, if you want to call it. And people look up to us. What is happening today because of what's happening in the world is that Muslims non-Muslims don't look up to Muslims. If you know now, let me tell you just an example. In football, the Soccer World Cup is taking place in Qatar, and already the cartoonists in France, they are already creating a cartoon and putting all the Qatari soccer players, with machetes and with guns and so on, with rifles and so on, painting us in one picture that we are all terrorists. So it is you and I, the way we compose ourselves in this world, that will change the mindset of people about us. And we have a duty as Muslims to do that. And I urge you all, to please display your Islamicity wherever you are, at the university, on the road, in any place where you are. So people look up to you and say, this is a Muslim. Shukran.
Yeah, mashallah. Thank you, Prof, for this great conclusion. I think there is one brother in the chat, Brother Nur Muhammad. He says, one question from me, direct question. Prof, do you allow this last question?
Yeah, go ahead. Let's just
okay, Brother Nur Muhammad, can you please ask your question and be short and straightforward?
I can't see that person.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Actually, I'm wondering why you can't see me. Anyway, just to be brief, I just want to ask you what a scholar once told me, that if you give summary permission for organ transplant and you allow it to be a common practice, then you are actually killing innovation in the field where people can develop artificial limbs, artificial organs. So in short, he means that giving a blanket permission for organ transplant is actually going to stifle innovation in the field of artificial limb and artificial organ creation. Is that the correct approach?
Good question. Yeah, good question. Now, the question that you pose is that if we give the leeway for human organs, then what will happen is that there would be, it will stifle knowledge, you know, in creating. But I mentioned to you before that, you know, that all these, what we actually allow today, you know, like organ transplantation. But remember, it is still very difficult. A person, we cannot donate the vital organs, the lungs, the heart, you know, and the liver and so on. We cannot donate it after a person had died. Because when the person dies, that these organs become obsolete. We cannot use it. So that is why we had to have a long debate in the Muslim world whether we can harvest organs from brainstem dead people, the brainstem dead. If you are brainstem dead, then only then can we harvest it or not, because it will be viable, because the blood is still circulating. So that once the blood is circulating, the vital organs, then it become, you know, viable for transplantation. But if you let the person, the patient die, then the organs becomes, you know, you can't do it. But it's not the debate of your question. The question is, as I said, that we have not, Muslim scholars have not stopped and said that cloning of human organs like the heart, you know, even the valves and so on, the heart valves and the kidneys and so on, they haven't said that you are not allowed to do it. They have given the carte blanche to do it today, because then it will replace the question of human organ donation. All right, and the question that comes with it, are we desecrating the dead? And then the question of some people pose, you know, when someone is brainstem dead, then is he dead or not dead? Then we are committing a sin and so on. All right, but so it will avoid all that if we can clone these organs and then create them, so we can have you know, we can have a multiplicity or surplus of these organs, so people who are suffering on waiting lists can actually benefit in the end. They actually can benefit. So let me just go one step further. And when I spoke about brainstem dead, you know, when it's brainstem dead, they have to carry out a very stringent experimentation on the dead. All right, they see whether the person is not yet dead, but is brainstem dead. They have to see whether they put water in the ears. They try to dilate their eyes and see with a strong light and see whether there's any response or not, and so on. And then when they carry out all these tests, then only then they say that the person is brainstem dead, and they can harvest the organ. So now the debate was debated in Kuwait. It was debated there, but is it wrong to do that? Because we have not established whether the person actually died, whether he's died or his soul is still there or the soul left the body and so on. So then one scholar who was very, very witty, then he said, you remember when Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu was stabbed? Do you remember? Then he recalled, maybe all of them recall. Do you remember? He said, I don't know the Arabic word, it's same, but it means that man katalani, who killed me. It may be another word in Arabic they use, but who killed me. So now he knew that the blow given by the person was what you call that, was so intense that it would lead to his death. All right, it would lead to his death. So he asked the question. So now, the same jurist then said, if a second person came and stabbed Sayyidina Umar, then what would happen? How would the judge now judge the two? The one who gave the vital blow to Sayyidina Umar, and the second one who came and stabbed Sayyidina Umar. So now he says, then the first one would get the death penalty, and the second one would get ta'zir punishment. We get a punishment at the discretion of the judge. So it means that even if we do that, then through the mercy of Allah, then we will not be accountable for having caused the death of the person because we harvested the organ from the brainstem dead. So this is how they resolve the issue. Of course, they debate. In India and Pakistan, they don't accept it. In the Arab world, they've accepted the brainstem dead question on the basis of that argument.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof. Thank you very much indeed for all these answers. Alhamdulillah, we come to the end of this very informative, very important lecture. I think you have done a great job today by helping us understand this area of knowledge. You have clearly and in simple terms made us aware that this bioethics actually surrounds us everywhere, and it's related to our daily life. It's not an epistemology or a philosophy which is up there, but it affects our thoughts, our character, our relations, our actions in life towards building what you have termed as desirable, a good life. Prof, this lecture has helped us to understand that we need really, instead of reacting to what's happening in the West or in the Western bioethics or what's happening in our reality, but you are advising us to go directly to the Quran and to the Sunnah and build our worldview, build our narrative, build our understanding of these bioethical things which are part and parcel of the life of the human as a vicegerent of God on earth. Instead of just reacting, we need to build our own epistemology, our own jurisprudence on the issues of bioethics. You have also helped us to understand that there is ijtihad becomes a must in this area. And this ijtihad should not be only a fatwa of an individual person or scholar, but a collective, institutional kind of understanding of Islam and the Islamic ethics in these areas of bioethics. You have also helped us to understand that in order to respond to these issues and questions which many of our audience here today asked, we need really to understand the core of how Islam looks at the human, looks at science, looks at technology, so that when we answer, we don't just give a partial fatwa without a kind of a sound principles and values behind it. And I think in your lecture, you have brought these 4 important arguments. So for us to understand that this bioethics can become, from an Islamic perspective, a full, comprehensive jurisprudence that makes sense and provides answers. Thank you, Prof, for all this great lecture. We really thank you, and I would like from the bottom of my heart to thank all these great people, scholars, researchers, postgraduate student who are or were with us in the Zoom and the YouTube. And I think usually, Prof, we will inshallah send to you the certificate but this one, we just show it here. This is our certificate of appreciation for your great work. And I would like all our, inshallah, I would like to once again thank you, and inshallah we'll invite you for more lectures, inshallah, and maybe workshops in this area, which today proven that it's very important in our life. And let's end our professorial lecture number 15 today by reading Surah Al-Asr. and the tasbih kafarat al-majlis.
إلى الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.
May Allah bless you all. Thank you very much, all our professors, participants.
Ameen.
May God bless you. Have a good day ahead. Assalamu alaikum wa
Wa
rahmatullahi
alaikum salam
ta'ala
wa
wa
rahmatullahi
barakatuh.
wa barakatuh.